You're listening to the Modern Life Mystic Woman podcast, hosted by Jen Neville and Taiha Lee.
Modern Life Mystic Woman started as a conversation about writing, dreaming, dating, magic, God, tarot, astrology, and our mutual passion for consciously creating both spiritually fulfilling and totally luxurious lifestyles.
We're all about living in alignment, being tapped in AF, and going all in on ascension. We're committed to intuition, inspiration, and creation.
We are the bold and the spiritual, and we're moving cosmic mountains together.
All right, so today we are discussing some fun stuff on the podcast, but another side note is that this is our first film session, so if you are interested in seeing us while we chat, you'll have to check out the YouTube channel for our podcast, so that way you can watch it on YouTube as well if you are not listening to the actual recording. But anyways, today we are talking about some exciting stuff. We're talking about something that's really present for both of us. And we're going to dive into creative identity and getting into what that means, showing up online, being on an online space, and how to kind of really authentically be yourself. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. And we kind of were talking about this beforehand, and we were just like, let's make a podcast about this. Like, we literally just got on, we were going to discuss something else, and we decided, just because we were chatting about this and this was so present for both of us, that we're like, let's just start recording. So that's what we're talking about today.
So here we are.
Yeah, so creative identities online. Gosh, how do we even segue into this?
I know.
So you posted something this morning that kind of really hit me. It's, if you follow Taiha, she does the morning pages, and she does like journal prompts, and there was a journal prompt there that I was like, oh, that's so present for me. So if you wanted to explain that, or even read it if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think I'll explain it. So basically I was doing this exercise last night with a friend about just like really getting dreamy and excited about like, what are these like alter ego versions of herself? And I was actually sharing a story that I had kind of forgotten about years ago, probably over 10 years ago, when I was about 22. I was actually living in Toronto, and I was getting this really strong vision of an alter ego, and she had a name, she had a style.
Wait, what's her name?
I don't know if I want to tell.
Okay, you don't have to share.
I'm gonna withhold maybe a couple details, but she was like a full-on identity.
Yeah.
And I was living with a roommate at the time who was a musician and like very self-expressed. And I remember us like sitting at a bar one time, like just like outside on the street. And I told her about this vision that I was having. And she's just like, well, you should take her out. And it was like, I don't know, this like beautiful permission to explore this like really bizarre idea that I had. And, I live so super remote now, but that is one of the things I do love about being in a city is like there's so much eccentricity and so many different characters that you really can go out and like pretend to be anybody,
Yeah.
And so I did, and I ended up like taking her out, and she'd always dress like all in black. She would wear a hat and red lipstick, and she would always leave out the back door of the apartment. And she just had this whole identity. And like, I remember even walking down the street and like passing a coworker, like did not even recognize me. Like I was so in character, and it was just such an amazing experience. And so I was thinking about that last night and having this conversation just around like, especially online, we try and be these very put together sort of versions of ourselves. At least I do,
Yeah.
And there's this side of me that like loves comedy and loves to laugh and has this very like quirky kind of dry, bizarre sense of humor that I would love to start sharing with people. But like, I'm afraid to like post a meme on my Instagram page because like, what if it doesn't look great? Like, what if it doesn't look as pretty as the aesthetic is going? And like, I guess that's kind of like what the catalyst for this conversation, because like,
Yeah.
how do we bring all these like multifaceted sides of ourselves and put them on our Instagram page without our audience thinking like we're totally chaotic?
Yeah, I see. That's my biggest problem. And it's so funny that you said the alter ego thing, because growing up, or like, especially in college, I always had, I love the concept of alter egos. Like, I love, creating different characters. I've always had like names for, oh, when I'm out and I'm doing this, that's that person. Like, oh, she came out last night. And it's always been, and it's to the point where I feel like I've dated people, or I've had like good friends in my life that they know. I mean, they'll be like, oh, there's crazy Jen, there's fun Jen. Oh, and it's so, because I remember I was talking to some guy and I was telling him about like my guy problems, and him and I had like dated briefly at one point. He's like, well, just depends which Jen you were. And he was like, there's that one Jen that, oh, she's so easy to fall in love with. I would believe that he fell in love with you. And then he goes, and then there's another Jen. And I was like, oh my God. Like, how many of me are there? And he was like, a lot. So I feel like I really took that to heart, that conversation. And I've been trying to just integrate it and accept all parts of myself, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want crazy Jen. And I was like, but then there's part of that craziness that people love. People love to see chaos, maybe like controlled chaos. So I've tried to embrace the chaos, and that was something that I like journaled at one point. I was like, especially in relationships, you look at these people and they have so much going on, and you're like, I love them despite all that chaos. And I think my big shift for me was, if I believe that, I have to at some point believe that there'll be somebody who embraces that about me. And so I need to embrace that. So it's like your humor side, your quirky side, you have to embrace that. Because I do feel the same. I feel like even on my YouTube channel, I come across as like really quirky.
You definitely do.
Yeah. And like part of me is like, I don't like to be tied down to that quirkiness, because I feel like there is a side of me that's like bold and really like, provocative and things like that. And that's more of my side that I'm afraid to show, is like that provocative side. And that's kind of where we were talking, like, I'm trying to, become more provocative, even in my flow of my Instagram page, or what I post, like posting some of my poetry, posting some of my writing that is provocative and that is deep and that is raw. It's like people just see me as this little quirky girl, and I'm just, I don't know.
Maybe that's part of like why we like attracted each other too, because we're kind of like mixing those energies and like,
yeah, totally.
And I think that's such a good point to make, is like these kind of alter versions of yourself. Like, how can you surround yourself with people who are sort of embodying those qualities and like can give you permission to
be that. Well, see, I love that story. Like, I need to try that, making my alter ego and really creating an identity for her, to where she's like, actually, you know what? Sometimes I feel like my alter ego would be a man, because I feel like that provocative side of myself is feminine, but it's way more like bold and assertive. Yeah. And sometimes, like, if I'm going out, I'll put on that persona. But is that not me? Is that like not me? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like, what part
of me is that?
Yeah. And I guess it's kind of like, is it just this like desire outside of you, or is it actually part of you?
Yeah, exactly. So that's like, and even doing like my visualizations kind of in the prompt that you gave, especially when I go on my walks and stuff, I'll like visualize a lot. And in all my visualizations, it's like you're uninhibited by fears, like if I, in my daydream world, I can act exactly how I want to act. And I'm always kind of that ultra confident version of myself. Just really, I feel like I see the real version of myself. But then it's almost like, for me, I don't think I come across quirky, but I think that's that like nervousness. That's like a nervous tick, and then it comes across as quirky. So I don't think that's my authentic self, you know?
Oh, interesting.
But I think my authentic self would be seen as like too, you know, it might be that like Sag energy in me that's like very blunt and very aggressive sometimes.
Like direct.
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely do kind of have that vibe in your readings.
Yeah.
Like you definitely lay down the truth when it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to keep it fun though. But I think it's interesting kind of, and then we were talking about, you know, turning up the dial on your personality. So it's like that funny sense of humor. It's like, how do you turn that up? Like, what's your...
Yeah. I mean, okay, so one of the things that has really helped me in the last few months is, like I said, like being around, like working with people who they have like that funny factor dialed up, you know, and like being in their energy and like a sassiness to it. Like I find very attractive because like I think like that, and I really enjoy that, like that kind of energy, and sort of like be in that, and then like it kind of like gives you confidence and permission to like channel that into your social media, into your creativity, into your writing, into your photography, like whatever it is. And so, I mean, getting back to kind of like what the prompt was, is like totally just letting yourself be experimental and like thinking of this wild, crazy version of yourself as fully self-expressed, like your fullest, most raw, creatively self-expressed self, like living in sort of this parallel reality. Like, what would you be doing? Like, who would you be being? Like, what kind of life would you be leading, you know? And just like, and then it's like, what if you just like started to adopt that label or that identity as like this eccentric artist, and even just like experimented for like, you know what, for the next 6 months, I'm just gonna go like say fuck it, and then I'm just gonna be like be wild and be this whole other identity and just like see what happens. And like that feels super present and exciting for me, because I think like, I don't know, sometimes you can think like life's so short, but then on the other hand, you can think like life's so long. Like we can have so many chapters of ourselves in this experience. Like, why not let ourselves like explore all our flavors?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's kind of, I always, you know, use affirmations for things, and my passwords and things like that. I won't say what it is currently, but for a while I was working there with especially writing and doing all my stuff. I was working with I am an artist, because in my fantasy world, I kind of give in to that inner artist, kind of how you say eccentric artist. I wouldn't say I'm an eccentric artist. I would just say that I'm like a passionate, like very passionate artist. And there's certain things that I feel like I want to express, and I want to be more raw, but then it's kind of associating that with, okay, from a business perspective, how is this going to work out for me? But then it's kind of ditching that mentality, right? And not, that's like manifestation or law of attraction 101. Like if I'm thinking like, how am I going to make money? I'm not being authentically myself. Instead of trusting that like my authentic self will figure it out, I just have to put myself out there, and I'm probably going to attract more of the right people towards me, because I'm going to attract more like-minded people.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, that's kind of the boat I'm in now, is like, stop thinking about it and just do it. One of the affirmations I've been working on a lot with has been, I am an artist. I am an artist. Yeah. And I feel like it shifted when I started writing my book, when I started really feeling like passionate about kind of wanting to get more into that creative writing space, because it's been something that I've always been interested in. But, it was really motivating me at the time, working with that I am statement. And I feel like that's really shifted me into that kind of energy of really wanting to express my emotions, really wanting to share my art, which is kind of my writing and stuff. But then it's kind of, how does it correlate to my business? Like, how can I turn this into business? And I feel like sometimes I have to revert back to that law of attraction 101, because it's like, everybody's doing the coaching thing. Everybody's in this coaching space. And I would love to get in there. I would love to be able to help other people, awaken themselves to their inner creativity, their inner gifts. And I feel like I'm too much thinking about the business side of it and not being authentically myself. So it's been kind of a process of me throwing caution to the wind and being like, screw it. I'm going to post what I want to post. I'm going to say the things that I want to say. And I'm going to attract the people who are meant to be in my life based on that. I can't try and align myself based off of like a business model,
Yeah. So, I mean, especially now where,
yeah,
like, what is even a business model? Like, coming out of this quarantine thing, like all of this spiritual ascension that's happening, like everything is evolving and new. And it's like, I believe like we are creating like the new paradigm in business as well, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's so hard too, from my perspective. It's like working with tarot, working with these things. Even, my Instagram name is Live Zen with Jen, which that's kind of a nickname that I always been given, was like Zen Jen, because I've always been into some esoteric stuff. So people just were like, oh, it rhymes. So when I started, because Zen Jen originally started as a blog, which was me writing and like writing all my feelings out. And it was like my online diary, sharing about my experiences and my lessons that I've learned. So it really started as me writing, me sharing my writing. And then it's kind of morphed into this little side thing with Little Girl Lost Tarot. And I feel like when people are like, okay, you're a light worker, the word Zen, it makes you think like I'm just this ethereal being who's just going to be prancing around flower gardens and things and like, oh, I'm so happy all the time. Like, no, I don't think that's not my personality. People have that perception.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much more to it of knowing, like, and even with the astrology stuff, if you're into astrology and the characteristics, like we've got fire in us, we've got water in us. I don't think I have any water in me. It's just earth.
I don't
and
have much
fire.
I don't think I have any water either.
It's all that fire. So I have all that like chaotic energy.
Yeah.
But I think like what I think is the true spiritual gift is being able to use like controlled chaos, like controlling that chaos and turning it into something, or even like alchemizing it, alchemizing all those feelings. I feel like that's art to me. That's art.
Yeah. I was having this vision this morning about, because what came up for me with these kind of like, I was tapping into last night of these two kind of like eccentric creative versions of myself. Mm-hmm. And one was this very sort of like, she was in like some New York art gallery, like a very prestigious thing where she's like this hardcore sort of like bitchy editor of like where all the things have to go with very like precision. And then the other side was this like very Carrie Bradshaw, like writer, like wild emotional woman who just lets emotions like fuck up her life essentially. Right?
Well, Carrie Bradshaw is like my icon.
Right? Yeah. And
even though she's neurotic.
So neurotic. But I think that's what's, and I was kind of like really looking at these two sort of like visions or versions, and it was like, oh, it's like because the Carrie Bradshaw neurotic emotional writer is like so wildly self-expressed and creative and
Yeah.
like it's messy, and then it's like this other version that's very edited and precise and calculated and is editing the creativity. So like
Yeah.
we kind of have both if that's like your
Mhm.
personality type, and I think it's learning this dance of how to go back and forth, but maybe we become too in the like edited version of ourselves and we don't give ourselves enough time to play in that
Yeah.
wild, neurotic, eccentric emotional state.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like, yeah, the editing I feel is more so what are people going to think if because talking about Carrie Bradshaw, I'm posting, I have my little later account that I'm posting a post that's a little bit provocative, and it's going to be a Carrie Bradshaw quote, but it's kind of about turning that dial up. Like I kind of want to start doing it on my page and see where that gets me. But even what you said in regards to life is short, I feel that there's like a side of me that's just very much so a lover of life. Like, and that's kind of what I posted about this morning. Obviously it's going to be way earlier than when we actually release this, but being a lover of life and like falling in love with life. And I think there's so much beauty in that, and so much beauty in like allowing yourself to be free and allowing yourself to be whoever you want to be on any given day. Like I could have this desire to be this wild artist and this wild kind of provocative person, and then tomorrow I'm going to wake up and be like, where are my crystals? I need to meditate.
Right?
I need to, and that's okay. And that's kind of that chaos that we're talking about, is accepting that every day you can be a different person. It's just about owning who you are on that day and letting that kind of be your creative muse, I think,
Yeah. Yeah, I was explaining it the other, because this is I've been having this conversation with the two people that are like the closest to me in my life right now, and it's like, so it's like I feel like this is a very common energy that seems to be going on with people right now, including us. Like,
Yeah.
so I can't wait to hear from everyone of like how this is resonating.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that I was thinking of it or explaining it was like, it's like baking a cake. I don't bake, but I do cook.
Yeah.
But I don't really follow recipes, but I know this will be the example that I'm trying to give. Like, you are a recipe, and it's like, okay, like 1 cup of this personality, like this version of yourself, like 1 cup of this characteristic, and like both of those together create this sort of alchemical version of who you are. Like I was doing my best friend's dating profile recently, and I like edited it all for her because I was like, this does not communicate like who I see you to be and who I know you are to be.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't even know who I am. Like, I'm like this and I'm like this, and I'm like, girl, I'm like, you're 50% wild hippie, 50% posh spice, and we just gotta blend those things together. Like, and I'm saying this to myself as I'm saying this because I think like that's what makes people fall in love with us. It's like you said, those like, I find that very attractive in men, is like, and in women too, but like I'm attracted to that. And so I think we kind of have to like process the fear around us being that as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so attracted to, I like men like that. I am so attracted to, even in myself, because, and being on that topic, like, being attracted to yourself, sometimes you've got to express those vibes to yourself. And I feel like that's how you go formulating these alter egos, or you go creating this stuff, because you're essentially taking a characteristic that you really like about yourself and you're turning the dial up on it. So one of the characteristics I actually really, really enjoy about myself is that I'm so unpredictable, or that I've created this unpredictability to where one day I could be this person, the next day I could be this other person. And where I used to be like, you know, oh, people see me as inconsistent, I'm just like, you know what, I keep things interesting, and I always want things to be interesting. So it's like, even my unpredictable nature, it keeps me having fun, because I'm like, shit, what am I gonna do next? So I feel like it's finding these qualities of yourself that you like, and kind of being unashamed with being like, I love this about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to, kind of how I said in the beginning, I used to be so afraid to show that chaotic side of myself to people. And I've really transformed it into something that I'm like, shit, I really love this about myself.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like,
And you know, like that's part of like the feminine spirit, is we are so multifaceted, multidimensional. Like, you know, there is all these different, you know, and the tarot is a perfect example of that. And we're going to get into that in another episode, but just like the archetypes of the queens and like the empress, the priestess, like all these women of the tarot, it's kind of like we can take on all these different characteristics or archetypes, and just like that is innately feminine. We have so much, like it is the creative self-expression, like the Shakti, like that is who we are.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like about translating that. And I feel like more women are becoming more attracted to that, because it's like allowing them to be free as well. Because I see certain creators out there who are super provocative that I really love looking at their stuff, because I have this, you know, it's that, you know, the light in me recognizes the light in you. So it's like, whatever you're attracted to, it's because there's something within you that desires that, you know? So even with men, so if I, like, the minute that I stopped kind of ignoring the chaos within myself, or allowing myself to love that part of myself, it was the minute that I stopped attracting men who were all over the place.
I love that you're bringing this topic up. I think this is so important, about like noticing the qualities that we are also attracted to in men, and that we can, rather than trying to chase that man to get that quality, we can start embodying that characteristic and quality ourselves. Like same thing, like I've always like, I'm definitely attracted to like the comedian type, like the eccentric comedian type, like that's my thing. And it's like, the more that I'm kind of like being in this energy, I'm like, oh, like maybe that's actually part of my identity that like I'm desiring to fulfill.
Yeah, totally. Well, because that's like, you know, and it's like that part of yourself that is begging to be loved, I think, or, you know, even it's me wanting to love that in another person, wanting to, like, I love you despite your craziness and your chaos. That's like me telling myself, like, I love you despite all this.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like that comedian of yours is like just wanting to get out, and it's like, I want to make people laugh.
Yeah.
Let me out. But I love, because you've sent me some memes, and I love the memes, but I do love how, because you're very like I'm very monochromatic, I feel like, but I've been allowing myself to get more into color and kind of certain things. But I like your aesthetic. It's very monochromatic, very black and white, which is so clean. But even your memes are black and white, so it actually still fits in that.
I guess
it still fits in that category, so I feel like it would totally work.
Well, I feel like it would be good to like let people know, like as we're recording this right now, like we are trying to merge, like we're merging you and I, like our personality together to create this sort of this brand that's a
combination of the two of us.
A combination of the two of us. And like for me, just even this creative process is like, just even like starting this show has been such a awakening of like this new level of creative self-expression that I feel like so lit up and so excited about. And it's almost like it's giving me this permission to like, ooh, like I can actually bring out these other sides of my personality through this brand, through this like connection conversation. And like, yeah, I just think like that's a cool part of the conversation of like how to bring, even like thinking of the idea of like, you know, for someone who's listening to this, it's almost like if you can think of like you and us as like two parts of your own personality. And then it's like this brand that we're creating is like, does this make sense? Like what we're trying to communicate of like what that visual representation is of these two sides of yourself.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's so interesting also going through this, especially with me going through kind of the changes on my own of incorporating more, because you watch my YouTube channel, I'm always in black. I lived in New York for 4 years. I'm a big, like, I have a poster in my room that says wear black or stay naked. Like, I'm big on the black.
Oh my God,
Everybody always comments and they're like, why are you always in black? But I have been incorporating more color into my aesthetic, especially I love purple, but it's like I feel like I've been shifting into this more colorful mindset, and it's so funny that it's at a time where it's like if it were me a few weeks ago, we would be on the same page with a lot of stuff, because I'd be like, yeah, black and white everything.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that this is kind of happening now, because now it's kind of, you know, learning how do we incorporate more color vibrancy, because I do think people are attracted to the clean look, and then you have people attracted to that like color, and it's just about finding the right expression.
And I think that's what gets me really excited, because it's like it's the challenge of like, I love the word juxtaposition, and I feel like that's what we're kind of doing, is juxtaposing this like, you know, clean minimal aesthetic with this like creative, colorful, feminine aesthetic. And like that the creative challenge of that feels very like stimulating to me.
But even in our title, Modern Life Mystic Woman, it's kind of, there's a juxtaposition there, like, you know, modern life being so kind of that clean, and then you have your mystic woman, which is kind of us being in our feminine energy and being provocative trailblazers, and just kind of talking about certain things that are maybe taboo, or I feel like more people are starting to become open to the idea of like mysticism and magic and all this stuff, and like redefining the concept of what that means. And I feel like, we're kind of combining that, which is really interesting. So it is stimulating, kind of trying to figure out how to merge the two concepts and then still make it something that is all encompassing of both of our personalities. And, you know, inviting to other people.
And I mean, like, those are the accounts that like I love to follow too, you know, where you can see all these areas of somebody's life, really like their full lifestyle, not just this one segment of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's kind of my own personal journey, has been really allowing myself to just be who I want to be, you know? But I think like a big shift was even our session last week, you know, me working with you. It's been kind of it's all been around that fear of being seen. Like what it would mean if I start not only just, I've just found out in my day-to-day life when I'm alone, I'm still suppressing parts of myself, you know, what happens if I give in to it? And that's kind of been my journey the last few weeks, is allowing myself to give in to who I am, allowing myself, even when I'm by myself, to be authentically myself. Kind of what does that mean? And even writing it in a journal, really, really dissecting it. So
and you know, like this is predominantly like what I do in morning pages. Like it's it's a way to tap into all these other sides of yourself, all these other versions of yourself, these potential lives and timelines you could be living in, and like play with them and script them. And it's about like building this practice of like writing it out so many times day after day, so that you become so much more comfortable in that energy, that like then taking the aligned action in this physical reality is kind of like so much easier, because you've already like programmed yourself to be comfortable with it.
Yeah. I agree.
You know, and kind of bringing it back to like the social media thing too, I'm just thinking of how this show is so impromptu today, which I love, because I've been doing the last week, I've been doing a bunch of like prompts and work around like what my values are. And in all of these like prompts that I've been doing, like this impromptu, adventurous, spontaneous energy like kept coming out in all of these stories I was sharing. So I'm loving like how like we thought we were going to be talking about one thing, and then we just like started rambling about
that's fun.
energy. And then it's like, boom, like, do you want to talk about this right now? Like, yeah, let's do it. And that's something I value so much, because that is allowing yourself to be in the flow state. Like that is creativity. And like when you can hold the container for that and not be so rigid on yourself of like, well, no, this is what we had planned. This is like next on my later account or my plan account. Like that's what has to be posted next, versus like just really tapping in and being like, what's present right now?
Yeah.
And sharing that, because it's not really about you. It's like you picking up on the collective energy of your audience, of all the people who are going to be wanting to like consume the content you're creating. And if you can energetically, cosmically tap into that energy, like I think that's what's really going to give like, you know, our brand and our message and business like the maximum exposure, because you're tapping into this like this current.
Yeah, it's so true. The current thing, especially like sometimes I'll be half asleep and I'll get it in my head, like something that I want to post the next day. And I'll just think about it to the point where I have to get up and like type in my memo, or I like speak into my phone, like do a voice memo, because I'm like, God, this is too good. I can't forget this. And if I don't do the voice memo, I will keep myself up all night, like in my mind, you know, drawing it up. But I feel like that happens when I'm the most in flow. I'm like, wow, I want to write about that tomorrow. And then it'll be like, yeah, I didn't really have a plan I was going to post something else today, but this feels really present. And sometimes it's like something shitty will happen in my life, and then I will come up with so much stuff because it's those feelings, or, you know, things that are happening really good in my life. It's about going with the energy. Like if you see, you know, 6 sad posts, that's could be the emotion there. That could be, it might not even be present. It might just be something that's come up that's regurgitated from like a long time ago. And it's taking that energy and like creating. I guess that's more about really getting into your creativity. I think it's like really focusing on what feels present versus what it is you have to write about.
Yeah, exactly. And like trusting, and I think that's what this whole conversation is about, is like us learning to even like, we're right along here with you, like everyone who's listening, is trusting the flow and the rhythm of like what feels present now. Because, you know, and maybe you can kind of get into the like the law of attraction side of it, where it's like, because if you're really lit up because what you're talking about is like really present, like that has like a magnetic effect.
Yeah.
Versus something that's like contrived and you think you should post because you have whatever XYZ coming up and it needs to go in a specific order, and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think, adding to that, it's just because there's so much. I feel like this week too has been, once you get in that flow, sometimes it's hard to, it's like an avalanche, like it all just hits you at once and you're like, oh my God, I have to do this, I have to write about this, I have to, you know, but it's one thing you write it at the time, and I feel like those feelings are encapsulated. So like sometimes I'll dip back into and repost a poem that I wrote 3 years ago, but that intention, that feeling is encapsulated in those words, you know? So even like we're releasing this video 3 weeks, maybe even more later, and we're still encapsulating the emotion here. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. And it makes me think of how, you know, I'm pretty sure you say this on your tarot readings, and I've heard a lot of other readers say this, like these readings are timeless. And I guess I kind of want these shows to feel like that too. It's like using our podcast, all these shows, is like an oracle almost of like, what energy are you in right now? And it's like trusting that the show you listen to is like answering the question that you have.
Exactly. Totally. And that's kind of when I'm looking at new podcasts, I always will like dive in and be like, oh, this is present for me. I want to listen to this one.
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting. But yeah, I feel like this has been a journey, and even being here talking about this so spontaneously, it's like this has been something that I've been working on personally too, just with my own branding and kind of being like, what feels present for me, and how am I avoiding, you know, just diving into myself. And I feel like a lot of it, like even with like the magic, like I always use that term to brand myself, magic. I love that word. And it was for a long time, I was like, oh, do I really want to brand myself like that? But then it's kind of allowing myself to just lean in and not be afraid, because it's like, oh, I don't want to brand myself that, because then people are going to think this about me. And I'm just kind of at the point where I'm like, F that, I'm going to be whoever I feel like being. And that's kind of, you know, me being authentic to myself, is being like, at the end of the day, in my fantasy, I'm that person who doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm attracted to those people who are just like, I don't give a shit. I'm going to be me.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Or even we were listening to I was listening to the podcast with Chakra Girl and Amanda Francis, how like they asked her, they're like, how do you respond to people who say this? And Amanda Francis just blatantly goes, fuck you. And I was just like, oh my God, I love that. I love that, because that's so, like, some people, even when I curse on my, and I feel like in my daily life, I probably do use the F word a lot. It's like a colorful word for me. But I feel like if I curse on my videos, I'll get comments that are people like, ew, you sound so unladylike, you sound this. And God, my response to them, I just want to sit there and write, well, fuck you. Because I'm like, what do you mean I sound unladylike? Like, you know, it gets to me, but at the same time, I'm like, well, I felt like saying the F word there.
Yeah.
Like, where's this concept that a word can be, you know, masculine or, you know, not feminine? I don't know. Or like, what is being ladylike? Like, again, fuck you.
Yeah. Like, you know, actually, I love the topic, how you're saying with, you know, using the word magic for branding, and just like, is it something that's going to stick? And I think this is the thing that a lot of people get hung up on. And, you know, specifically kind of talking to maybe like mystical sort of women who want to start a spiritual business. It's like, you change so much, and like, you're never going to be locked into this one identity. Like when you start your spiritual business, or you start any business, you're going to like evolve so much throughout that process. So like, don't, like, what you start off with is never going to be what it is forever. I don't personally believe, especially if you are a super creative person. And like, I don't know, like when I think back of like 10 years ago or longer, when I started like my first blog, it's just like where I'm at now looks and feels completely different. And I think that's like, it's such these like little details we get hung up on. And like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I went from a professional golfer to YouTube tarot reader.
Yeah, like
And
that's
now I'm
amazing.
trying to like get more into my artsy creative writing side. So it's been an evolution, but yeah, I get on those waves and I'll talk to like branding people and they'll be like, you need to kind of pick a path. And I'm just like, how can I pick a path? Like I have so many things that I have so many avenues that I want to, work on. And sometimes I want to do the tarot. Sometimes I want to do the poetry, the writing. I want to be an author. I want to do this. It's just kind of, I feel like it's like even now for me, it's so present that I'm working through it, but it's a struggle to be like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, who am I trying to be here? And it's just, I guess the answer to that is just be yourself.
I know. It's like, it's so simple that it's like
Yeah.
so annoying. It's like so cliche, but it really is the truth. It's just like, be yourself, be who you are. But I think the thing is that is like the maybe the harder piece to get is like you only really know who that self is by spending like a lot of time with yourself, with all these like creative aspects of yourself, and like being in that energy and seeing like what feels the best. Like one of the things Marie Forleo always talks about that I love is clarity comes through engagement. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so powerful because like we can be in our head about all these different things, all these different versions of ourselves we want to be, all these things we want to do, but like that doesn't actually bring clarity. Like it comes through engaging in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And engaging with like being present, being engaged with yourself to know like what you need at the moment.
Yeah.
I think and that's been my big thing in this whole, and in that, I feel like we talk about this book a lot. So if you guys haven't read it yet, get it. But the witch book, what hit me so hard and why it was so present for me at the time that I read it was because she said like a woman is this, a woman is that, a woman is whoever the hell she wants to be on any given day, at any given moment, at any given time. Like, just because you're emotional one day or you're feeling sad, if you're feeling this way, I've spent months where I just kind of allowed myself to be, in an energy that maybe wasn't what I wanted, but I kind of let myself go through it, feel it. And I feel like that's so important to honor whoever it is that you are, engage with that person. There's something that needs to be heard, like especially if you're going through depression and things like that. It's like there's something there that wants to be felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even with that, because I feel like I don't like using labels, so I don't like using the term depressed, but I've spent months where I have been like, not able to get up, feeling that feeling of being bored. And I do feel like that one is a big, like, that's your soul, your consciousness just wants to expand. Like, and it's just, you're not letting it. So you're staying stuck in that vibration and that energy. And I've been there like multiple times. But I feel like it's honoring whatever's happening at the time, instead of being upset with yourself of why can't I get off the couch? Why can't I do something? Why can't I be active?
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up because that's exactly what led me to the artist way and doing morning pages is like,
Mm-hmm.
I was really depressed and I had just finished fashion design school. I invested all of this money and, a year of my life. And then, very quickly realized like that was not the life for me. Like I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't lit up, and I started doing morning pages and like, it allows you to like access this creative self-expression. Linking back to how you said like the word depressed, like one of the things that I find so powerful is like the opposite of depression isn't happiness.
Yes,
It's expression, right?
or
Depression.
expression.
What were you going to say?
Because actually in my yoga classes, they always use the word, the opposite of, maybe it wasn't the word depression, but I thought it was the opposite of depression was engagement, which is a word that you just used recently. So, which I find interesting, but expression.
Yeah, like, so if you think of like the definition of to depress something is like pushing it down,
Yeah.
right? So the opposite of that,
Yeah.
so that's where I think people get tripped up. If they're feeling depressed, they think like, I need to boost my mood, I need to get happy, da 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 da. And it's like, no, like actually you need to like express whatever it
Yeah.
is that you're suppressing and depressing, and like allow that spirit to sort of like fill you up and like move, and it becomes this sort of like cyclical energy through you, and then through that self-expression you will find direction, which then will lead you to like what does actually bring you happiness, you know?
Yeah, totally. And even like, because people handle their depression differently, and I don't mean to put air quotes, I don't like using labels.
I know.
I'm not a label person, so I don't like being like I'm depressed. Even when I'm in that mode, I'm like really cautious about what I'm communicating to myself. So in those moments, I feel like it's so easy to numb out. My source is I emotionally eat. I love to just, numb out, food, Netflix. And I feel like, especially in this quarantine time, that's been so present. In the beginning of my quarantine, I had that moment where I was like, oh no, you are getting back into this mode. Because I spent a whole year there, whole year. And I knew it when I felt it. I was like, oh no, you're not going back here. You're not going back here again. So it was kind of just realizing it and being like, okay, what are you trying to numb? What are you not wanting to face here? Like, why are you, resorting to these numbing substances, food? Some people it's alcohol, some people it's drugs. And it's like nipping it in the butt really quick, really identifying what is it here? What's the core issue here?
Yeah.
And I feel like, that's been probably a lot of people's experience during this quarantine phase, just struggling with lacking motivation and, seeing a lot of stuff. It's okay to not be motivated. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to rest, but definitely, face some of the things, like really honor yourself by expressing emotions and allowing yourself to fully feel.
Yeah.
And not just like numbing.
Yeah. And like allowing yourself to get super dreamy and experimental with your life, like in this new version of your life, like you can come out of this however you want to, however you dream of. Like, that was always my biggest thing, like when I've moved to new cities, and that's part of like I think why it's so thrilling to change your environment in terms of like moving to new places, because it enables you to like take on a new identity in a way where like nobody knows you. You could literally be anybody, and that's who people think that you are, And so like I guess like to kind of like wrap this episode up, like that would just be, I don't know, my like challenge to people, my creative challenge is like, give yourself like a time frame and be like, I'm just gonna actually experiment with my life. And like, whether it's 1 month or 2 months or even a week, like whatever feels right for you, of just like, what if I did just crank the volume on this one part of my personality, and see what happens.
Totally. I like that. I'm going to keep doing that on myself too.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. This has been such a fun episode for us, and we can't wait to see you guys next time.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us over on Instagram at Modern Life Mystic Woman, where we're sharing inspirational writing and magical lifestyle tips on the daily.
And if you loved this show, let us know. Subscribe, comment, shoot us a DM, whatever your style, and make sure to share it with all your spiritual besties.
See you next time.